Are you in your 50s trying to see if you can retire at age 60? Well, in today's video, we're going to walk through a case study of this exact example and walk through a recent scenario that someone presented to me. And they said, hey, Jacob, we're trying to retire at 60. We want to spend $6,000 a month in retirement. And here's our information. So what we're going to do in today's video, we're going to walk through what their situation looks like, kind of give you the details about it. And then also we're going to see how they can improve their situation to make retirement possible for them. So beyond trying to retire at age 60, they had three other primary questions. The first one being, when should we take Social Security? The second one is, can we live on $6,000 per month? And the third one is, should we consider doing any Roth conversions along the way? So let's go ahead and take a look at their situation and see what they can do to improve it. So Bob is currently age 55. His wife Sue is 53. And right now I've got Bob passing away at age 82. He just mentioned that, hey, I've got some family health concerns that have come before me, and also I have my own health concerns. So I might not be living to age 90. So we're just going to plan to age 82 and show you how that might be might change some of their different decisions they might need to make. Sue is healthy as far as we know, and we've got her living to age 90. Obviously could be longer than that. So that's their ages, and that's their kind of planning horizon that we're factoring in here in the system. Now let's take a look at their overall asset makeup and see where all their assets are. So we can see their total net worth is around 1.5 million, but that is a good chunk of that is actually made up of their primary residence that's worth about $750,000. Now they do have a mortgage on that worth $200,000 they still have to pay. So we'll talk more about that in a second to see, hey, is there a better way to pay that off, or should they just pay it over the remaining life of the loan? Now let's look over at Bob's retirement savings, and he's got $632,000 in his 401k. That's all tax deferred, and he has a small Roth IRA they recently started a couple of years back. And then Sue has $270,000 in her 401k, and she also has the same amount in her Roth, simply because they started them at the same time. Their joint bank account, they got about $85,000 in cash. Currently, they've got no dollars in a brokerage account. We'll see if that's going to change or if they need to start doing some of that here in a second. And their HSA right now has $7,500. They've had to use some of those assets recently for some different medical expenses, but they hope to build that back up over the coming years. So that's where their assets currently are, some of their liabilities. Now let's take a look at their goals and what they're trying to accomplish. So they mentioned, hey, I want to retire at age 60, but remember there's a 2-year gap. And so Sue would actually be retiring at age 58. So we want to make sure that we kind of plan for that and do that accordingly. But Bob wants to retire at 60. That's the goal. And then how much they want to spend in retirement, we're factoring in $6,000 of discretionary spending. Now, that does not include how much they would be spending on a mortgage. So we'll have to see if paying off that mortgage before retirement or early on in retirement is going to be beneficial for them. So they want to be able to spend $6,000 every single month outside of any debt obligations on the house. Also, we've got to factor in their healthcare costs since they are retiring or hoping to retire before 65. So in those 5 years, or I guess 7 years for Sue, we've got to factor in how much that might be for private health insurance. So I've got $1,000 a month is what I'm factoring in for them before Medicare in terms of their premiums they would have to pay. Now, once they reach age 65, which is Medicare age, they're going to have to decide, hey, do we want a Medicare Advantage plan, or do we want to do a Medicare Supplement or Medigap plan? So I've got them taking a Medigap plan along with some Part D on top of that. And that's going to be an additional on top of their Part B premiums around $3,500 per year each. So that's what I've got factored in there as well. So that's their healthcare costs and kind of what we're looking at. For now, we don't have anything travel budget-wise allocated for them on top of their $6,000 per month. So that could change, just depends on their plan and what it looks like. But for now, we're factoring no additional spending on travel. Now, what does their income look like currently in their job? So Bob is making $170,000. He recently got a good raise. And so he's excited about that and hopes to save more money because of that. So Sue is making $82,000 currently, and that's where their income stands. Now for their Social Security, Bob's Social Security at 67 is projected to be $3,000 per month. Obviously that could be subject to change depending on his earnings over the next 5 years, but then also inflation or COLA adjustments along the way. So $3,000 is where it is at right now, likely to be higher than that here in the coming years based on his new earnings he's adding on to his wages. So that's where his will be at 67 currently. Sue's is expected to be $2,200 per month at 67. One of the big questions was, hey, when should we take Social Security? Should we take it at 62, full retirement age, or even delay it past full retirement age? So we're gonna look at that in just a second and see what the best thing might be for them. Also, Bob mentioned that he has a small pension that he has from a previous job, and the annual amount on that is going to be about $8,000. So it's not substantial, but it's also not something to leave out. So we want to make sure we factor that in, but that starts at 65 for him. So what are they going to do for savings over the next 5 years? That's going to be maybe one of the most important time periods throughout their whole savings journey in their career to make sure that they are ready for retirement. I've kind of developed this idea of the last 5 and the first 5. This kind of 10-year period or this 10-year window of your life is maybe the most important in terms of your retirement planning. So the last 5 years of your career and then the first 5 years of your retirement, kind of making sure we do things well and really optimize your dollars as much as possible during that 10-year window is going to set you forward and set you on the right trajectory throughout your retirement. So I want to dive into that concept a little bit more here in another video, but just wanted to present that to you and say these last 5 years are crucial to their success in retirement, but also their first 5 years. So let's take a look at their savings. We can see that Bob is going to be maxing out his 401k here moving forward. So that's going to be a catch-up contribution on top of his normal contributions that he could make because of that new salary increase that he got. Sue is going to be putting 10% of her salary into her 401k. And they mentioned that they're saving to an HSA and a brokerage account, but it's really not a whole lot. So right now, a brokerage account, they're putting $500 per month into that, or they're going to start doing that. And then the HSA, they're adding $4,000 a year. So not quite maxing out the HSA, but they did want to make sure that they're putting dollars into it for retirement healthcare expenses. Now, their pre-retirement living expenses are estimated to be about $7,000. That's going to drop by a little bit here in retirement because some of the kids are going to be out of the house. They're no longer going to be on the payroll, so they don't have to spend as much on them moving forward. And that's kind of their situation. That's kind of their asset makeup. That's kind of how much they're wanting to spend and expecting to spend, and they're also wanting to retire at age 60. So with that information, let's go ahead and take a look and see, can they retire at 60 as they're hoping to? So we can see that they've got a 51% chance of success. Now, that's probably not where we want to be. Now, there are 4 or 5 different things that I think we need to look at here to see how we might can improve their probability of success or their chances to retire successfully. So the first thing is going to be Social Security timing. Should we take that at 62? Should we take it at 65? Should we take it at 70? What can we do to optimize their Social Security strategies in order to give them the most income based on their life expectancy that we have factored in here? The second thing is their investment allocation. Currently, they're invested about 60-40 across the board. So how can we improve that or change that to make sure that we are making the most on their dollars and earning the most dividends, interest, or capital gains on their dollars to give them the longevity that they're looking throughout their life? The next one is, should they delay their retirement by a year or two? We're going to evaluate that and see how much that impacts their plan. Number 4 is their distribution strategy. We're going to see how this might change based on a more realistic distribution approach. And finally, we want to see if spending less on a monthly basis helps their plan dramatically throughout retirement. So those are the 5 things that I really want to kind of look at today and see, hey, how can we improve these to give them a better chance of a successful retirement? So let's go ahead and kind of start playing around here. So for their Social Security, we've got them both taking it at full retirement age right here. Now, what if we change that? What if we say as early as possible, meaning both of them are going to take it at 62? Let's take a look and see, does that improve our chances of success? And it doesn't improve our chances of success, and it actually decreases it because we're going to end up dying with 0. So that's not going to be optimal. Now, what happens if we change this based on each person? We kind of split their strategies to where they're not taking it both at 62 or both at 67. What if we change it and do it differently for each of them? So what if we say Sue is going to take hers at 62, but what if we say Bob takes his at 67? I'm curious if that changes it positively. So we were at 51% here. So we increased it to 52%, but it's still not optimal. Now, what if we go to all the way to 70 for Bob? So this is delaying it past Social Security age. Now, this is going to be a long time from their retirement, 10 years or so, if they retire there at 60. So we see that there is improvement, but the one thing that in terms of percentages, it's not really a big deal. But the one thing I want to point out is how much money is left over at the end of their lives. Based on the base plan, we've got $61,000 left over, but by taking their Social Security in a more optimal way, they can have more assets left over. So having leftover money is not the most important thing for them. They just want to make sure that they can retire successfully. So we're going to do this. We're just going to say that Bob is going to take his at 67, Sue's going to take hers at 62 to kind of get that income stream going. And then remember, at 65, Bob has that small pension that turns on as well. So that's how we're going to change Social Security, at least for now. Now let's play around with their investment allocation. Right now it's around 60-40, so a classic kind of retirement portfolio. What if we change that to, let's say, 80% stock, 20% bond? Now that might be more aggressive than perhaps you're used to, but let's just see what happens here. Okay, so we got a pretty big jump here in the overall number, I guess, chance of success, but also the dollar amount that they're going to have left over. And the reason for that is because they can actually spend more money because they're going to have greater growth over the rest of their life. So if you think about it, if you're really conservative whenever you're in retirement in terms of your investment strategy, that's less money that you're going to have potentially growing for you. So it's kind of if you're willing and able to withstand some of the volatility that comes with a more aggressive investment approach, you can actually have more money over the rest of your life. And due to inflation, we need to actually take some risk along the way to make sure we're beating that inflation number and have money at age 80, 90, 95 if we ever need it. So 80% stock. Now, I like to do this by building out a 3-bucket income strategy and make sure it falls in line with that, but then also kind of checking that to see, hey, does this go far and above the 4% rule? Maybe I like to use the 5% rule really and say, is this far above 5% distribution rate over an annual basis? And if it's far above that, then I'll say, hey, maybe we need to pull back a little bit on the allocation and maybe we need to pull back on how much we're having to spend out of the portfolio. But for now, we're just going to say that they are going to do 80% stock to take a more aggressive approach, at least over the next 5 years as they get closer to retirement, because they're going to be saving so much more money into their accounts, which means they can withstand some volatility because they're going to be replacing the losses if there are any losses that come up. So we see that we've gone from 51% to 64% just by doing those two things. Now, let's take a look at their retirement age. Okay, so they mentioned, hey, we'd love to retire at age 60. You know, Bob, whenever he turns age 60, Sue would be 58 at that time. But they mentioned that it's not like a hard and fast thing that they have to do. They're not dead set on retiring at age 60. That's just a hope, and they want to see if it's possible. So at this point, I would say maybe it's not possible to do that simply because of how much we have saved currently based on their distribution rate and how much money they need on a monthly basis in retirement. But then also one of the kickers for them is going to be the fact that they have that mortgage heading into retirement as well. So what if we delay their retirement by 1 year? I'm curious how much that improves things. So they would be 61 and 59. And let's see what happens here. So that's a big jump as well. So that 1 year and not having to take money from the accounts for that one extra year really improves their overall chance of success. Now, I want to see here and say, hey, what if they go from $6,000 a month to $5,500? I'm curious if that makes a big difference. Maybe that's not what they want to do, but I'm curious how that changes things. Again, that does make a big improvement. So we can see that by making some changes, we've had a positive impact. Now I'm going to move this back to $6,000. I don't want to cut into their spending every month because that just doesn't feel good having to live on a budget in retirement if it's not necessary. So what I wanted to do instead is say, hey, what if we kind of have more of a distribution strategy that's realistic for most retirees? As I work with retirees, I see all the time that they spend more in the early years of retirement, called your go-go years. And then in the middle of retirement, you have your slow-go years. And then the last years of your retirement, you have what we call your no-go years. So typically you have this curve or this arc of spending. So you spend more early on, less in the middle, and maybe more on the back end due to health concerns or long-term care costs, whatever might arise there. But it's all relative to your health. Typically, our health goes down and degrades over time. So in the early years, we want to make sure we're going and doing the things we want to do. So our spending is going to be a little bit higher, perhaps early on in retirement. But as we progress through the years, our spending will likely go down. So that's called the retirement spending smile. So I want to change our retirement spending from inflation adjusted, meaning every single year their spending is just going up by the inflation amount, to be more reflective of that retirement spending smile. So we're going to change that and make that more realistic, I think, for a lot of retirees. And that's where we're going to see a lot of the improvement. And so by doing this, we can see that by spending more early on in retirement to go live and enjoy and do the things we want to do, and then that kind of lends itself to spending less later on in retirement because of the different things I mentioned already, we can see that's a more realistic spending approach. So by doing a few small things, we've changed their investment allocation to be slightly more aggressive. We've changed their Social Security strategy to where Sue is taking that early on at the beginning of her retirement at age 62. We've delayed their retirement by 1 year, so they're retiring at 61 and 59 now rather than 60 and 58. I've not changed their retirement monthly spending amount, and we've changed their spending cycle to a more realistic spending approach throughout retirement. So that brings them to a 90% probability of success, and we have a lot of money left over. Now, what does that do? That means we can spend more probably because of these things early on in retirement, so we can change that and see that the percentage of success is probably going to go down here, but our dollar amounts is really what we're looking for. So I've changed this back to $6,000 here. But one of the questions they have is, hey, is this mortgage really going to be a burden for us moving forward? So I'm curious what happens if we eliminate that mortgage as soon as we retire and then we don't have that mortgage anymore. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that we're going to have to take money most likely out of their 401ks, which is a tax deferred account. So we got to pay the income tax on it to pay the mortgage off. And we're going to see if that is beneficial for them. Part of it for them is not necessarily, hey, is this the best thing financially? It's more or less a weight off of our shoulders from just a mental perspective and emotional perspective to not have that large debt item looming and kind of sitting on our shoulders throughout retirement. So let's take a look at that and see what happens if we change that to be paid off immediately at retirement. So we're going to change this and we're going to pay this off at 61. Okay. So now that we've updated their payoff schedule to be paying that mortgage off early on at age 61 or 62 for Bob, let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like from a cash flow standpoint. And we can see here that from their housing expenses, they're going to be paying their $24,000. They're paying $2,000 a month. That's slightly more than their minimum payment, but they're paying $2,000 a month currently. So over the next 5 or 6 years, they're going to be paying that amount, $24,000 a year towards the mortgage. But that'll leave them in 2029 at age 61 with $103,000 left on the balance. So at that point, they would take that 103 either from their taxable investment account, they could take it from a 401k, they could take it from their Roth IRAs, or kind of a combination of all those things, depending on what they're hoping to accomplish from a tax standpoint, and they can pay off that mortgage and be done. And if they end up deciding to pay off this mortgage immediately at retirement at age 61, then they'll have to figure out how that kind of coincides with any Roth conversion strategies that they're trying to implement. Now, that was one of the questions that they had was, hey, should we be doing Roth conversions? And let's see if that is actually going to be beneficial for them. So we can see here that their investment account balances are going to change over the next 5 years as they're saving while they're still working, and then also probably going to have some market or investment growth built into that as well. So over the next 5 years, we can see that by the time they retire here, we can maybe say that they're going to have closer to $1.5 million in their 401ks, which are tax deferred. Their total savings is going to be around 1.8. Currently, they sit at just over $1 million. So investment growth plus the large savings amount. Remember, Bob is maxing out his 401k. Sue is saving 10%. Plus, they're doing money to the taxable and their health savings accounts. So that's something we got to look at. Now, at $1.6 million, typically I'm going to evaluate, hey, do we need to do Roth conversions because of a couple things? Number one is going to be the widow's tax trap. If Bob passes away early, like he's anticipating perhaps happening, that means that Sue is going to have to take RMDs as a single tax filer, which could be ultimately a bad thing from a tax standpoint. She's going to have to pay more taxes on the same amount of money. So let's see right here if they're going to be able to benefit from a Roth conversion strategy. So this is their tax brackets over the rest of their life. We can see early on, this is while they're still working. So they're just over that 22% bracket, which in 2026, that's going to become the 25% bracket. So something to be aware of. But you can see that they're eclipsing that. So they might not want to do any conversions while they're still working. But once they hit retirement and their income is going to go down, we can see that there maybe is a gap here in these few years before they get to RMD age. And that's why you see this going up here at this point. They've got to start taking distributions out of their retirement account. So we've kind of got this, 5 to 10 year gap or window to say, hey, should we do Roth conversions during this time period? And if so, how much? So let's take a look at this. What happens if we decide to go, I don't think they're going to be able to do anything at the 10%. Nope, they're always going to be above the 10% bracket. What happens if they go to the 12% bracket? So if you see this green section here, that would be Roth conversions that they would do during these years until they get to 76 for Bob's age. And so by doing that, what we can see is they're going to end up saving potentially a lot more money over the rest of their life on taxes, but then also have tax-free growth into the future for these later years. And what that does is whenever you see this drop here, that's whenever we're saying that Bob passes away at age 82, but now Sue has to take all those RMDs as a single filer, and you can see her tax rate is going up dramatically because those RMDs are going to be larger and larger every year based on how much money they have in those tax-deferred accounts. So getting as much from a tax-deferred account to the Roth account could be a really important thing for them, and doing that well. So we can see that doing the 12% bracket, at least filling that up during these years, is going to maybe be important. I wonder what happens if we go to the 22% bracket. So this is a big one here. So we can see that they could save a ton of money in taxes. And what this is kind of factoring is money saved on taxes, potential tax-free growth after we do the conversions, and making sure we're not paying taxes on other items like Social Security. So Once we get to Bob's age 72 or 73, we're no longer having any dollars in a tax-deferred account. Now, that's if they fill up the 22% bracket, which they may or may not want to do. So it's something to evaluate on an annual case-by-case basis to see how much do we want to do this year. But if they just did this as is, it's saying that we can save that much money in future dollars over the rest of both of their lives combined. So by doing this, they're going to have no taxes to pay after 73. And there's a couple reasons for that. They've got no more tax-deferred balances to pull from, so no RMDs. But then also their Social Security will become tax-free because there's no other income that they've really got coming in outside of his pension, which remember is really small. So by having just a small pension, Social Security income, they're likely going to pay no taxes on that income, which is really nice. And they're going to have all of their assets in a Roth IRA, which then they can go enjoy and go on vacation and travel as much as they want without paying any additional taxes. Now, there is one caveat to this. They really don't have much in cash and they really don't have much in a tax-deferred account to actually pay the taxes with. So they're probably going to have to withhold those taxes, at least in part, from the conversion amount when they do the conversion. So it's not optimal to do it that way. If you had the cash available, maybe it's more effective to do it that way. But still, even then, they're going to have a good chance of saving a lot of money in taxes over the rest of their life simply because of doing a few Roth conversions in their what we call gap years, and they're going to be investing a little bit more aggressively in those Roth IRAs. And these are just some of the ideas that we're walking through with them and saying, hey, here's the benefits of this, here's the drawbacks of this. Depending on your preferences, we can say, hey, we're going to do this one, we're going to not do this one. Maybe they do want to take Social Security at age 70, let's say. Well, that may or may not be the best thing from a dollar amount standpoint, but it might be the thing that they want to do. So I like to just say, hey, here are your options. Here's the things that are available to you. Here's some ideas that I have on how to improve your situation. Let's talk back and forth and see what the best solution for you specifically is going to be, because not all these solutions are the exact same for every person. In fact, I would say it's different for every person. So if you're someone who is evaluating retirement, trying to say, hey, what's my opportunities here? What's my potential here? Can I retire by the age I want to retire at? Reach out to me. I'd love to kind of have a conversation with you, hear your circumstances, and maybe give you some insights on things to think about. So if you're curious how I do this with my clients and just kind of want to learn more about what that process looks like, my email should be down in the description below, as well as a link to schedule a quick phone call with me. No obligation. It's completely free, and just want to offer that to you if you think you could benefit from it. So let me know down in the comments below if this case study was helpful for you, or if you'd like to see a different type of case study here in the future. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time.